The staff of the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com join WVUA 23's Jen Chapman for an in-depth analysis of the Crimson Tide and SEC football. This is Tide Sports TV.
Welcome to Tide Sports TV. We start things off in the big picture, brought to you by the Soup Store. Joining me from the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com, we've got Cecil Hurt. Cecil, this really is the big picture as Alabama is now headed to the national championship game against Clemson in Phoenix. But first, let's recap the Cotton Bowl. What impressed you the most about Alabama's dominating performance against Michigan State?
Well, I thought their preparation was good. Their intensity level was good. Stuck with the game plan when it was 0-0 in the first quarter, and everybody's saying, why isn't Derrick Henry running the ball? You know, they stuck with what they felt like would work, made big plays when there was opportunity to make plays, put away the opponent when there was an opportunity to put away the opponent. And
how important was Cyrus Jones' play, particularly the interception coming at such a critical time in the game?
Well, it was difficult. I was one of the voters on the MVP awards, and it was difficult to single out one person on defense, but you combined that with the punt return on special teams, and I thought Cyrus played really well. He played like a defensive back has to play with a short memory. Michigan State had completed some passes down there, but I thought he sort of baited Connor Cook into the interception. It was well covered. There was a chance that it was going to be intercepted even if Cyrus didn't intercept it. So I thought that he did a really good job on that play and on special teams, but it was difficult to single out one player on defense.
Did you see any concerns that really stuck out about Alabama that they would need to address for the next game?
Well, you know, not in that particular game, but obviously there's, like Nick Saban said today, there is no perfect game. There's nothing that can't be improved on in all three phases, and they'll have to improve in some areas to play Clemson, but it's hard to carry one over from the other because Clemson's a very different style team than Michigan State.
To start, you talked about some fans complaining about Derrick Henry not getting the ball as much. Do you think that actually helped the team to not always be relying on Derrick during the game?
Well, it helped the team to run the plays that the defense was vulnerable to and was going to allow. And you can't worry about people griping about the game plan in the first quarter. You know, everybody wants instant this and instant that and instant success. And if they're not ahead 14-0 after 6 minutes, some people can't handle it. Other people sort of understand what a game plan is, what you're trying to set up on offense and defense, and realize that if they're going to put 9 guys in the box, you're going to throw on the edges. And it's not sensible to be stubborn and say we're going to give it to Derrick Henry no matter how many guys they put in the box, 9, 10, because he's Derrick Henry and we can give it to him. But you can't tell everybody that.
And this is playoff football now. Every team is ready to play, and they're going to have to put their best in there as well. So what did you think about Lane Kiffin's play calling? How would you grade what he did?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I thought that he looked at what Michigan State was going to do defensively. They were going to try and stop the run first. They couldn't do it with 6 guys in the box or 7. And even when you say play calling, people have to understand that there are a lot of those plays where Jake can check in, check out, can look at the box, see how many guys are in there, check out of a run and throw to the edge. So it's not just, you know, that they call 44 dive on the sidelines and then they run a 44 dive. There's a sequence that a quarterback goes through, both pre-snap and post-snap, that determines what you run, and it's based on what the defense is going to allow.
So then let's go to Coker. What did you think about his
performance?
Yeah,
I thought it was good. I thought he was smart. I thought he played within himself. I thought when there was the opportunity for big plays after 15, 20 minutes, he was able to capitalize on those, made great throws. His arm was good. Didn't get excited, didn't turn the ball over, and so I thought it was exactly what they needed.
And how about this defense? We talk about the front 7, but the DBs also stepping up as well. Can anyone run on Alabama? And really, I guess at this point in the game, it really only matters, can Clemson run on Alabama?
Well, you know, they can because their running game is structured a little differently. If they can get some yardage out of their quarterback, who had over 100 yards against Oklahoma, those count too. Those are rush yards too, even though they're not necessarily scripted. Can anybody, you know, line up in a refrigerator box and knock them out of the box? No, they can't. But you know, if you spread them out, if you take advantage of the talents that your player has, then sure, you can run the ball. I don't think you can make a sustained living just running the ball and being one-dimensional, but you can certainly find success in the running game.
Now, it's been said that Alabama's defense strength is in wearing down the other team because they have so many guys. Can Clemson defend against that?
Well, there's depth that goes into it. There's conditioning that goes into it. There's game situation that goes into it and how much adrenaline you have in a situation. I don't think that they can match Alabama depth for depth, but, sometimes guys can be good after 60 plays even if the other guy's playing 30. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes that does get to you. So if Clemson's having success, they'll do fine.
What stood out about the Tigers and their win over Oklahoma?
That they were multidimensional, that they were quick and athletic, that they understood that Baker Mayfield wasn't really all he was cracked up to be, and they were able to contain him defensively. And again, they've got playmakers on the edge, offensively and defensively. The quarterback makes them multidimensional, and they play with a lot of enthusiasm. Dabo fires them up. Speaking
of Dabo, you've covered him for some time. What has he done there that is so impressive and really stands out? Obviously, they're in a national championship game.
Well, he's recruited well. I think the players really like him and play hard for him. He's brought in a good staff. He's improved that over the years that he's been the coach. He was an interim coach and got promoted, so he sort of inherited a staff that he's built sort of the way he wants to build it. Continued to bring in good athletes, continued to recruit at a top 5 level, top 10 level every year, and has again got guys who believe in him and play hard for him.
What do you think will be like the secret or what he needs to do to beat Nick Saban?
Well, he's a lot younger than Nick Saban, so he could probably outrun him, outthrow him. But it's what his players do, and there's no secret formula. There's nobody that's beaten Alabama because they knew some trick that Alabama's coaches couldn't figure out. The teams that have beaten Alabama under Nick Saban have had good personnel making good plays, and in many cases Alabama hadn't executed well. If Alabama executes well, they're going to have a good chance to win the game. If not, you got to have athletes who can capitalize on that. I think Clemson probably does, but some of that's going to depend on how many opportunities Alabama gives them.
Well, you just spoke to it a little bit. What are going to be the keys for Alabama getting this victory against Clemson?
Keys to every game are the same. You got to run the football, stop the run. You got to not turn the ball over and put yourself in negative position. You got to be successful in the kicking game, come up with more points, which includes the yards that you get in field position by punting, by kickoffs, by kickoff coverage, by kickoff return. You got to be every 100 yards is 7 points in the special teams. You got to not give away 200 yards there. Every game comes down to that.
Sounds exactly like what they did against Michigan State. Well, that's all the time we have right now for the big picture, but Cecil will be back on the show in a little bit when we answer your questions, so stay with us. We will be right back with Inside the Tide, but first take a look at these Tide lines. Welcome back to Tide Sports TV, where it's now time we go inside the Tide, brought to you by Ziegler Meats. Switching it up, we've got Aaron Suttles from the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com. We're going to start with Jake Coker, Calvin Ridley. How important is the connection that these two have?
Well, he's Alabama's best deep threat. Turned out to be their best receiver this year. Probably would have been Robert Foster had he stayed healthy, but Calvin is a true freshman, really stepped up. Basically flipped the Arkansas game on the long touchdown from Jake Coker, and then we saw what he could do. I mean, the first touchdown he caught against Michigan State, he was interfered with. Looks like the ball was thrown too far to the inside. He got enough speed and got enough body position and control to catch that ball to set up the first touchdown of the game. So you can't overstate how important Calvin has been to this offense this year, and that he's done so as a true freshman is even more remarkable. Went over 1,000 yards in his freshman season, so him and Jake has a little bit of chemistry and a good thing going right now.
You know what, we spoke to him before the game at the media day, and he was saying how one of his goals for the season, he had 3, was get good grades, become a freshman All-American, and get 1,000 yards receiving. He already had the first two.
We don't know about the grades. But
no, he said they were good. He said he got the good grades. He said he was just waiting to get the 1,000-yard receiving.
Well, that's a good. He checked all those off his box.
Yeah, and I also asked him about being in the likes of Julio Jones and Amari Cooper, and he was very humble about it. But also said those are great guys, so he's really excited that people are comparing it to him.
Rightfully so.
All right. Well, what can we say also about the other receivers? Because Richard Mullaney has been huge as well for Jake Coker, and I think even them being older, the veterans kind of, that I think helps as well.
Well, yeah, Richard it'll get overlooked because he doesn't make the splashy plays, but Richard was important in this offense this year because he came in and showed these young guys how to be receivers, how to run routes, how to get off coverage, and it's not the most splashy thing in the world to be called a possession receiver. Sometimes that's taken as negatively, but it's an important facet. I mean, he made a couple nice catches over the middle. He's not scared to go over the middle. He shows a lot of toughness, and he's not afraid to block. So he's brought a lot to this offense this year.
Glad you brought up blocking as well, because O.J. Howard also, his role has kind of been underplayed, but there's a lot more that goes on to get some of these receivers open. Yeah,
you're not going to play for Nick Saban at wide receiver, tight anywhere if you don't block. I mean, go back and look at Julio Jones, who probably set the standard for Nick Saban's offense from that position on how to block. He's probably the most physical wide receiver Alabama's ever had, or at least during the Saban era, and he set the standard. If you don't block at wide receiver, you're not going to play.
We can't go through a show about Alabama football and not talk about Derrick Henry.
Oh, boy.
He wins the Heisman, but this was not his game. It was everybody else's game, and him as well. He did set records throughout the game as well, but will we see more of him in Clemson, against Clemson?
If Clemson wants to take him away, like Michigan State tried to dictate that we're not going to allow you to run Derrick, we're going to load the box with 9 guys. A lot of times, Jake has an option at the line. He has a run-pass option. If you count the box is what a quarterback's taught to do. If you count that the numbers are advantageous to you to throw to the outside, then it's a quick screen, which we saw a lot against Michigan State. When Alabama goes deep with Calvin Ridley and starts stretching the field and maybe they have to back off, then you see more of Derrick. But is Derrick tired? Is he worn down from all these carries? No. Go ask Calhoun, who got stiff-armed by Derrick, if he's tired.
He didn't just get stiff-armed. He got
he did a flip.
Stiff arm down to the ground.
And that was a really good play. I believe he was an All-American defensive end for Michigan State. So Derrick didn't have the numbers we're accustomed to. I think he had 20 carries for 75 yards, but he still counted for 2 touchdowns. And it's still going to be always a big part of Alabama's game plan.
Something else we saw a little bit different, Kirby Smart's defense blitzing more early in the game than they usually do. Is that something we can also expect against Clemson?
I don't think as much because, all due respect to Connor Cook, he's not as versatile an athlete as Deshaun Watson. If you blitz and miss Deshaun Watson, you might be picking up the football in the end zone. With Connor Cook, and Connor's a good athlete. He can run a little bit, but he's not Deshaun Watson, and there are very few like Deshaun Watson. And I think they wanted to hit Connor. They wanted to test that shoulder. How durable is he going to be in this game? Make him rattle him a little bit. And I still think as much as he got hit, he made good decisions. He was quick with the football, but I don't think he'd seen the speed that Alabama threw at him.
All season long, when we talk about the defense, we talk about Reggie Ragland, A'Shawn Robinson, Jonathan Allen. What players maybe haven't gotten as many accolades, but are a very vital part of this team? Yeah,
the guy I thought would have a very similar season to what we saw last year from Xavier Dixon is Ryan Anderson. I think you don't notice him a lot, but I think he does a lot of the dirty stuff, and he's a guy that can not only, Tim Williams, he's a situational player. He comes in to rush the quarterback. Ryan can do both. He can rush the quarterback. He can play the run. And look back at that Tennessee game. He gets the key sack that was basically the game-winning play against Tennessee. But he kind of does the dirty work that you don't always see, but he can also make the splash play. I think he doesn't get enough credit for what he does on this defense.
And I like how you said that, because today the players said that Deshaun reminds them most of Josh Dobbs from Tennessee, and they've kind of been watching what they did against Tennessee. So if Ryan Anderson needs to have a big game again, that's the type of team he likes to play.
No doubt.
All right, special teams. How big was Alabama's special teams? They've just been improving all season long, and then to have that game.
Yeah, I mean, we saw J.K. Scott, I think his first punt was 54 yards that pinned them deep. Adam Griffith made a 47-yard field goal. So they've just been pretty consistent all year. And you throw in Cyrus Jones, who now has 4 punt returns for touchdowns this year.
They have a record as well.
And they did all the special teams work without Tony Brown, who's their key gunner on special teams. Tony Brown is a key special teams player, so you can't lose, as Cecil mentioned in the previous segment, hidden yardage and punt, covering punts, kickoffs, all that. those yardages will cost you. And when you get a chance to get 3 points, you have to take it. So they've been pretty consistent over the second half of the season.
How much credit does Bobby Williams deserve then for the way the special teams has turned themselves around?
Well, he's the coach, right? Yeah. So it's like a quarterback. When something goes well, you should get credit for it. And we certainly
blamed
hear
when it doesn't go well.
Yeah, we certainly hear his name enough when things don't go well unfairly, I might add. But he's the coach. He deserves credit.
All right, each matchup since Ole Miss has been a one and done basically kind of deal. This is the most important one and done.
Right.
It is the big deal. You could get 16-16. That's now what everybody's saying. Clemson is the matchup. They're undefeated. They've got a lot to play for as well. Who are you picking to win this championship and
you're
why?
going to put me on the spot here.
Sorry.
I like Alabama. I don't think you win with defense, and Alabama has the best defense in the country. They have the best defensive line, the best front seven in the country. And I think Clemson will have some success. I don't know if it will be sustained success, but you're going to ask me, put me on the spot, I'm always going to go with defense.
Defense wins championships, right?
That's what I've heard.
That's all the time we have for Inside the Tide, but on our next segment, we're coming back to answer your questions that you posted on the TideSports.com message board, so stay with us. Welcome back to Tide Sports TV. It's now time to answer your questions that you posted on the TideSports.com message board or that you tweeted at us at Tide Sports TV. First question is about the SEC, and I love this one. Considering the bowl results, was this really a down year in the SEC? Well, first of all, who said it was a down year? But we will address it. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. It wasn't a down year before the bowl results,
right,
if you knew what you were watching.
Right.
If you just wanted to have a hot take and say, oh, they're down this year, then maybe you thought it was a down year, but it doesn't mean you know anything about football. So it was about like most years. It's tough. It's a tough schedule. Alabama's schedule ended up being particularly tough because the four teams in the SEC that didn't make bowls were the four teams they didn't play. So they didn't contribute to any of those losses. Every single SEC team they played made a bowl. 7 out of the 9 teams that they played won their bowl. So, that's a tough schedule. And we knew all along that it was tough. You didn't have to say, you just go and you watch the game. You have some general understanding besides what somebody on Twitter says, and you might grasp that. But if it took bowl results to beat that into some people's head, then good. That's good for them.
Some will still argue it.
This all came.
You can't fix stupid.
This all came from last year, where the three main SEC teams that have the most high-profile season, Alabama, Ole Miss, Michigan, Mississippi State, didn't perform all that well in a bowl game. Mm-hmm. But what's that got to do with this year? Just like, what is this bowl result going to have to do with next year? It's an entirely different team. Mm-hmm. So no, if there's anything you see about the SEC you want to pick on, it's that the quarterback play wasn't great this year. Well, they still have a team in the national championship game, and they had a lot of great running backs in the SEC this year, and they still play good defense. So, no, the SEC wasn't down. It's not going to be down next year.
Where do you think this comes from, though? This was kind of the start of the season, was the SEC's down. The SEC doesn't have quarterbacks at the beginning of the year, and it's kind of been the whole way through. Where does that come from?
If you're a fan, I get it. If you're a fan of Oregon or Ohio State, I have no problem with that, with them saying our league's good and the other league's not as good as they say they are, because that's what fans do. If you're an expert or an analyst, you should have a better take on that. And, it's just common sense. They've got the biggest budgets. They sit in a geographic area that produces a lot of players. They're committed to it. They spend money on coaches. They spend money on facilities. They're going to be good. It doesn't mean that every single team is going to be great every single year, but to argue that the SEC was down or not as good as some leagues, there are other good leagues, and every league has good teams. Clemson's good. Ohio State and Michigan are good. Every team's every league's got good teams. But when you're talking about week in, week out, which is what matters, because what are you arguing about? Are you arguing about cosmetic? We get the Floyd of Rosedale Pink Pig Trophy if we have the best conference. You're arguing about how you get selected for the college football playoff, how difficult your strength of schedule is. The playoff committee saw that. The fact that other people didn't see it, that's their problem, not anybody else's.
I like Cecil's answers. Yeah. All right, we're moving from the SEC to the NFL, specifically A.J. McCarron. He has started Cincinnati's last 3 games in place of the injured Andy Dalton, and he's won 2 of those games. Can he be a viable NFL starter?
He already is. He's won 2 of 3 starts. And depending on Andy Dalton's health, may start a playoff game. So you never know.
I think that's the first Alabama quarterback to do that since 1981.
Yeah, and he put his team in position to win the game they lost. You know, if A.J. Green makes a play on the ball at the end, he's 3-0 as a starter. So is he a viable starter? Yeah, he's won 2 games.
Yeah, you know, and would he have started if they had gotten the bye and had 2 weeks for Andy Dalton to get well? Don't know. Don't know if he'll start for sure this weekend against Pittsburgh. But I think that the Cincinnati coaching staff feels pretty good about him if they have to have him out there.
Yeah.
So the tendency sometimes is for people to see one thing and then still have to question it and make it be something else.
Well, you know, the flip side is he's played 3 games. I mean, he's not an experienced
not a large
veteran.
sample size. Yeah.
He's not a guy that's been to the playoffs before. But you know, does he have the ability to win a game? Sure, he does. Sure, Tebow won a playoff game. It's not impossible.
That's true.
Hey, now.
He did.
All right, I like Tebow. All right,
I like Tim Fine. I'm just saying. You don't have to have the greatest resume to win a playoff game.
We go from the SEC to the NFL and now to basketball. Heading into SEC play, what do you expect from – I looked at Cecil because I know he covers, but we'll both answer this. What do you expect from this Alabama team? What have we learned about Avery Johnson in the pre-conference schedule?
Well, I think he's done a great job to be 10-3 at this point. You know, how that'll carry over. You've got 9 tough road trips. You know, every one of them will be difficult. I think their home court advantage once the football playoff gets over. I think their home court in Tuscaloosa will be good. You know, I think they'll upset some people here. I still am not convinced they're an NCAA team. You know, I think that their RPI is a function of scheduling. So we'll see. But you know, they certainly will be competitive for everybody. They'll be a tough out for everybody and have a chance.
And it's really too bad that they play Kentucky at home while all this is going on. So while fans are out in Phoenix and they've got Kentucky at home.
Yeah, I agree with Cecil. I mean, what he's done in the non-conference, you know, look at years past at Alabama basketball where your season's almost kind of over by the time you get to the SEC because your postseason shot's almost shot there. So they've got a shot to beat some teams. And what he's doing with a limited roster, I think people still forget, you know, they're not going to be what they're going to be in a couple of years. They're lost Dazon Ingram, played a couple games without Shannon Hale. He's getting the most out of his talent right now.
And picked 13th out of 14th in the SEC, and
they play hard.
Like they're already
they
playing
play
better
hard,
than that.
and it's entertaining to watch.
Play hard. They're obviously well coached.
Yeah.
So.
All right, back to the college football playoffs. What can Alabama fans traveling to Phoenix expect, and what are some things to do outside of the game?
Expect to spend a lot of money, for one. I mean, it's a reality when you've asked fans to go to an SEC championship game and then go to Texas and then turn around and go to Arizona. I mean, some people have that kind of money, and that's right off the holidays where some families have spent some money, so they can expect to spend some money.
Great answer.
Phoenix is good. You know, it's not going to be 100. This isn't summertime. Phoenix.
No, it's going to be cold.
It's going to be chilly.
30s at night, I saw.
Especially at night. It chills. Even in the summertime, it cools down at night for the most part. But you know, highs in the 60s, lows in the 30s. It'll be another nice stadium. It's not as big as Dallas, but it'll be good. And there's a lot to do. You know, there's a lot of places to go. Depending on what you're interested in, you can stay in Scottsdale. You can play golf. You can hang out at the resorts, or you can do all kind of things. You can go to Sedona. You know, be aware that saying that something's in Arizona is not like saying it's in Alabama. And you see that Grand Canyon, and you think, yeah, I'll go up there, and it's like 600 miles, or it's not that far, but it's a
nice trip. It's
a good haul up to that corner of Arizona, or down to Tombstone, or you know, even if you're going to the Grand Canyon or Las Vegas. Some people will stay in Las Vegas and come.
I know people are flying in
there too. Yeah. And also, you can just take advantage of the outdoor. They have Camelback Mountain out there, so there's plenty. And then A Mountain, we're on the campus of ASU, so there's plenty of hiking and obviously plenty of outdoors activities. So we will be there covering the game, and who knows how it will end up. You guys got a score prediction before we go?
No.
There we go. They're keeping it BC right now. Thanks for joining us on Tide Sports TV. Have a great week.